Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. So many of you listen in every week, and we talk about all good things around life and wellness and growing your business. And this week, I'm super excited to share someone who lives actually in my hometown, and she does work that I absolutely love. I love to bring specifically women who are doing really great things in the world to share what they're doing with the audience. And she has the host of a podcast, Travel with Purpose. She offers retreats. And today, Aileen is going to talk to us about traveling with purpose. She's going to bring in her experience with international service projects and how she has really tied the two of them together to offer retreats that also offer opportunities for the people attending the retreats to get involved with local communities and make a bigger purpose, create a bigger impact in the world. So I'm sure you can see why I'm excited to host her. You all know that I love retreats. I help coaches to create retreats, and Aileen is somebody who is doing amazing things out in the world. So thank you for joining us today, Aileen.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate your gracious introduction as well.
We're going to have a lot of fun today. The first time we met, we just went on a really, really long bike ride, and I think we could have talked for hours about our passion for traveling, our passion about creating an impact in the world. And I loved hearing about how you got started. So, would you be willing to share how you got into creating retreats through your work at the collegiate level and how that all started for you?
Yeah, so it goes back quite a ways. I don't know how much history you want me to share. Um, I guess I'll just give the whole quick background. I mean, in my 20s, I actually learned French early on, and then I switched to Spanish after college. So don't ever say you can't learn a language later in life, because I am now much more fluent in Spanish than I am in French. But I went to Quito, Ecuador to do an immersion program, and I did community service as a way to learn language. So that's what got me on my path, if you will, to engage in communities through service projects as a way to learn language and culture. I could go on and on, but long story short, it turned into developing my dissertation for my doctoral studies in international education was in the field of service learning. So, which is an academic side of analyzing the service that you do and the root causes, let's put it that way, of why there are such community problems and how you can really address the root causes. So that's the academic perspective. I started doing projects and taking student groups way back in, my gosh, when I was in my 20s, late 20s, I was teaching at Azusa Pacific University, and I started a program to do immersion Spanish and service in Mexico, Zacatecas, Mexico. And that actually led to my doctoral studies and dissertation. But after that, fast forward a few other years, I was teaching at Boise State University as a bilingual education professor and started taking groups collaboratively to Belize because I had done a Fulbright Specialist project with the University of Belize and had a lot of insight into the educational needs of the kids in the schools. So that led me to develop service projects in Belize as part of academic studies at the university level. So that's where I really started doing the service as part of trips abroad. So that at that time, they weren't necessarily retreats. They were more student-based, both high school and college. But as it turns out, I was a mother of teenagers at the time when I started that, and a lot of my friends who were moms and friends of moms all wanted to come on my retreats. So of course I'd say, sure, come along. We can always use another chaperone. And long story short, fast forward to now, I decided to start doing women's retreats, and not just women's, other people's as well. But I have one in Belize for women coming up in October, where I wanted to really focus on women our age, and I'll say in our 50s, 60s, it could be 40s, 50s, 60s, but that are maybe having transitions of life. Maybe your kids have gone off to school or whatever transition you might be in, and you want a little time to retreat for yourself, give back to yourself, as well as see ways you might transition your life and get involved in different communities to give to others. I also really like to travel with purpose because I think it's much more meaningful way, not to minimize in any way, any kind of travel is fabulous, but I love getting really engaged in communities where I go. And when I do community service projects, it enables me and people that I take with me to see behind the scenes, if you will, to really get an insider perspective on maybe the people's lives that are serving you at the hotel you're staying at, for example. And oftentimes it's a big different reality than what you're experiencing at a beautiful resort. So I like people to be able to see the other side of the train tracks, if you will, to get that perspective and hopefully even participate and give back, impacting their lives and your life.
I love that. You and I are both passionate about learning, about education, and we both come from this place in our heart where we truly believe that travel is some of the best education that you can possibly get. And anybody who knows me and has been following me has known I homeschool traveled with my kids 10 years ago, and now my oldest has moved to Italy for 4 years to go to college, and my younger daughter and I are traveling the world as a competitive surfer. And yet, as we say this, and this is an easy language for us to speak, I know that there are a lot of people out there who are interested in travel, and they may not really know how to get started, or they don't feel comfortable creating a trip to go somewhere. And this is part of the reason why we both love to offer retreats to people, because as we have been well traveled, we like to offer those opportunities for people to come and join us in creating an experience in another country where I don't always know the language, but sometimes I know you speak three languages, I think. So you probably do know the language, but where you know the language or you know the culture. One of the other women I'm working with in creating retreats, she has a relationship with El Salvador. So she likes to bring retreat leaders to El Salvador to understand the culture. She knows the culture, she knows the experience. You have this as well, where you have places where you've hosted retreats, where you have relationships, you understand the culture, you understand the community, and you create experiences for people to come be a part of, not only taking some time for yourself, but also diving a little bit deeper. And as you said, the other side of the train tracks, I really love and appreciate that you bring that side to your retreat so that it's not just going to a five-star resort, which is really nice, but also learning and understanding and educating yourself about the culture that you're visiting so that you have some awareness and also respect for the people who live there. If you're going to go and visit that place, that you have this deep understanding and awareness, and that you're just traveling with more compassion and more I want to say like less ignorance, I guess, as you travel. There's a lot of value in that, and I love that you offer that to people. What would you say is makes your in saying all everything that I just said, because there are lots of retreats that people can go on, and I've hosted lots of retreats and I've helped many women host retreats. What makes your retreat different in that aspect that you're providing that community outreach and awareness piece? What can someone expect to experience or take away from that retreat experience that they might not get at a different retreat experience?
Yeah, great question. I would say number one is the focus on community service as like so I cater the retreats to what people want, if you will. Um, I mean, I design them, but if people want more time doing service or more time doing Pilates or yoga, whatever it might be, or more time, just downtime, retreat time, I want to serve the people that are going on the retreat, obviously. But what I do is offer the connections to do meaningful and valuable, what I consider service in the community, coming alongside. I also really recognize the limitations that we as outsiders have coming into other communities and thinking that we're really going to make a difference, so to speak. I think oftentimes we are impacted perhaps even more than the people that we quote unquote give to. And yeah, that's a big part of the takeaway from my retreats, if you will, as people come away having built real relationships, connections that are meaningful and deep in with local people that make
Mm.
them want to go back, that make them want to stay in touch with these people. And we provide ways you can stay in touch. And it's not just one and done, so to speak, and that's the end of the retreat and you never see that person again. So trying to build long-term connections. And again, that's my name of my website and business is Create Connections, because that's what I love doing, is building bridges, creating connections for people globally to impact each other's lives. Um, what is unique as well, I've been doing a podcast this last year and a half called Travel with Purpose. I started it because I have been doing, as you mentioned, I've been traveling with purpose most of my life for about 30 years. And I decided, well, why not? And podcasting became such a thing. And I was doing it for another organization for teachers. I said, well, why not do one what I'm passionate about? So I started this, and what I do is I interview nonprofit organizations around the world, primarily places where I travel, so that I get firsthand knowledge and insight into the organizations which I'm interviewing. So, for example, this past year, I was actually working as a Fulbright Scholar doing teacher training at a university in Cartagena, Colombia. But that gave me an opportunity to interview over a dozen nonprofit organizations in Colombia. Many of them I was actually able to visit in person and really talk with the people about the meaning and importance of their nonprofit organizations. So I try to bring people alongside for retreats, the organizations that I don't want to say vet them, but I have
Mm.
spent time with the founders and value and see the value. I mean, I think all nonprofits are doing great things. But as we all know, leadership is really important to deliver and the impact that nonprofits are having in the communities. Mine are often focused on education, but they're across the board, all different. You can see in my website all different types of nonprofits that I've interviewed, from reef restoration, lots of different types. But again, I bring people alongside these nonprofit organizations to support what they are already doing in the community,
Mm.
so that we're not, you know, I would just say, a lot of people do, and I've participated in these projects where you go and build a garden or build a classroom or do something like that for a school, which is fantastic. I tend to like to really be engaged with the people as much as possible. So an example of a project we're doing in Belize, there's a nonprofit called Believe in Belize, and they are donating from the United States. They're donating over 20,000 books to the country. Literacy is a big issue that
Mhm.
they are working with in their country from the educational perspective. And I can go into all the reasons why on another
Mhm.
but what we're doing as part of our retreat in Belize is we're coming alongside and helping distribute the books to schools, and we'll be going into the classrooms, meeting with the teachers, reading the books along with, the reading programs that they have in the schools. So again, we just come alongside to support what's already being done in the community and bring awareness to our retreat participants about schools in another country that you might not ever be able to walk into as an outsider necessarily. And this offers the opportunity to walk in, be a part of what they're doing in their classrooms, see how they don't have air condition and they
Mm.
have the heat like we do in Florida, for example, and they have the old wooden desks and just the chalkboards, and they get perspective on how a lot of the world operates educationally, very different from some of the bells and whistles we have in the United States. Again, just to gain perspective and see how we can contribute.
There are so many things that I would like to highlight about what you said, but I think I'm going to highlight a couple of different things. I want to start with the like most people just don't know. And I loved how you said that we actually get more out of that experience than we realize, because it's in the giving that we receive. And I was reflecting on 10 years ago when I did my yoga teacher training in Nicaragua. And I specifically chose to do it there. And I brought my kids there for a month and we lived in the community because part of that yoga teacher training curriculum, which was Radiant Life School Yoga in Chinandega, was a very low income area. And they didn't, and most people in the United States don't realize that, especially in Central America, I mean, education is a huge privilege and not really available. And you just don't know until you go there. And every time I travel and I have a local person who's helping me, I'm always asking questions, trying to just learn about how is life really here. And we just traveled to El Salvador, and I realized the same thing. Like, it's not available like it is in the United States. We have education everywhere and it's free. It's really a huge privilege in most of Central America. And I love that and most people just they don't know that until you've traveled there. Like, you really just don't think about it. You don't know a lot of, if you're traveling to Europe, well, it's not the same thing. But if you're traveling to South America or Central America, it's very different. And it's I think it's something that we take for granted. And I want to highlight that I love that you said that you support organizations that are already in place because they have the resources. I feel like, from my experience when I did my yoga teacher training, we did the same thing, and we were able to create a bigger impact because we knew from the community was something they already had in place, what they needed, versus assuming that we knew what they needed and coming in and bringing something that they really have no use for. And one of the things that this was just a huge learning moment for me when I was in Nicaragua was, and it feels vulnerable to share, but something simple is, when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I had a local lady come in and care for my children during the day and also teach them Spanish, teach them about the community. And at the end of the month, their minimum wage is quite a bit lower than in America. I wanted to like give her more money, and it really, like, there was no meaning in it. It was more efficient for me to buy her a year's worth of literally beans and rice, which is what I did, because she was like the community mother who fed all these children. And so just learning and understanding that what we think is helpful in a community is, it might not always be helpful in the way that we think it is, but really understanding what their needs are. Or, for example, let's just say bringing in, maybe bringing in backpacks to a school is useful. Maybe it's not, because maybe they don't even have books to carry to school. You just don't know. But if you partner with organizations that are already in place, then you can really create a bigger impact. And that's really important to understand. And it's really just increasing that level of awareness where you get to the point where you realize that we actually don't know anything at all going into these other communities. And so it's really humbling, actually, because some of us have really big hearts and we want to help, but we're not necessarily able to help in a way that creates an impact until we really truly understand how the community operates, because it's very different than what we're used to, which is why it's important to travel with people who do have that understanding and do have those connections. And I really just want to emphasize that, because I have witnessed other people create retreats in other areas, and we can have great ideas to do that. But unless you really truly understand a community and its needs, you won't be able to really create that impact. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that you and I have been talking about, which is how you can support other retreat leaders to create these experiences and opportunities with their retreats in other places. Now, some of my listeners are probably some clients that I'm working with. They might be yoga teachers, they might be coaches, and they're likely probably offering retreats with their coaching practice. And they may be interested in creating an experience or an opportunity. Maybe they are particularly passionate about a place that they travel to, and they want to host a retreat in a particular place. And they want to offer an opportunity for the people who are coming to the retreat to get involved with the community. Tell me a little bit about, we understand your experiences in international services. Tell me a little bit about the places that you can support people to do this, and how you work with retreat leaders and coaches to enhance their retreats by helping them and their clients travel with purpose?
Great question. Thanks, Jen. So what, as you mentioned, I like to do is bring the service component along to a retreat. I know, as you know very well, for those who have led retreats, there's a lot of logistics to handle. And whether you already have somebody you're working with or not, it's always, from my perspective, always wonderful to have somebody to work with on a retreat, just your right arm person. And for example, if you're doing a yoga retreat and your focus is obviously all the logistics, or you might have a logistic person and then the yoga part of it. But I know there's a lot of coordination and time and energy that goes into facilitating that aspect of the retreat. So what I like to do is focus, for those who want to incorporate service, my piece of the puzzle, if you will, is to bring in the service part. And I do my due diligence to identify, as we were just talking about, nonprofit organizations in communities around the world where you would already be going, to come alongside a nonprofit organization. And my role would be to really do the, like I mentioned, due diligence, to talk with the founders and leaders of the nonprofit to identify what would be most useful for us as outsiders coming in, if we were to come in for a half day and a couple hours a week, whatever it might be. What could we really do to contribute something meaningful to their nonprofit organization? And oftentimes it's very different than what we might imagine from coming from the outside, as you gave examples, that we often don't know what we don't know. We might have good intentions, but they might not really serve the people needing the service we think they're needing. So for an example, you asked where I go. I mean, because of my proximity right here, I live in Florida as well. I've been focused on Central and South America, and I speak Spanish. So I feel pretty comfortable working in different countries in the Central and South America area. My primary focuses recently have been Colombia, and I just want to put a plug for Colombia, because I think in the United States, Colombia gets a really bad rap in politics. And the history of Colombia, it's a wonderfully beautiful country, incredible places to see. And the people are phenomenally friendly and want to take you in as like, mi casa es tu casa. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful communities I've spent time in, honestly. And I say communities, countries. So I really want to emphasize the beauty of the people and the country. Anyway, but so there's many different parts of Colombia that are very safe to go to. And I would love to do a retreat in Colombia with anyone out there. I've been doing trips to Belize for over 10 years, so I'm happy to collaborate with anybody and have a number of different types of nonprofit organizations to work with in Belize. Cuba is also one. I'm doing a retreat in January 2025, but happy to talk with anybody who's interested in going to Cuba. I've come alongside and offered to do service with other people that are already doing trips, like you mentioned, in El Salvador, Nicaragua. Even if I don't have the firsthand connections to these countries, I'm more than willing, and I feel able to do my homework and discover the nonprofits that are there in the region of the country that you want to work in, and help identify people we could work with together if you were out there and wanted to create a retreat and incorporate service. So if I'm not already working there, I'm happy to discover ways to work there with you.
Oh,
So,
I love all that. And, as I'm hearing you speak, like I'm just feeling this overwhelming, warming sensation of my heart, and just thinking about all of the experiences personally I've had in my life and have also given my children by visiting these places and experiencing the culture in a way that we do not hear about. Like
mhm.
I I mean, there's really no words to even put to that. It's really special, like, as you said, when you get into the heart of communities and you really learn and understand, and also travel with awareness. Like, it is important to have the knowledge and understanding and awareness to that there are places that might not be, that are more safe than others. And just to really know how the people and the community and the country work, like to really know and understand like how does this country really work? Like what's really happening here? And just to have that knowledge and that understanding when you travel is so important, and it makes the travel so much more enjoyable because you're traveling with purpose. You're there to learn, and you're there to learn from a different perspective. And as you said, Colombia and places that we've been to, like El Salvador and Nicaragua, I think of like I mentioned to people all the travel that we've done there, and people sometimes respond, but isn't it not safe there? And well, yes, of course, there are areas that might not be safe, and it does operate differently. And it is very different in our country. You do see at the airports, like the security looks very different than it does in our country, and that takes a little bit of getting used to. But if you're traveling with somebody who knows the area, and you understand that, and you just understand that that's part of your culture, you feel a bit more comfortable. But then underneath that, when you get to meet the people in the community, I mean, the woman that took care of my children, like we still send messages all the time. It's been 10 years. Like her kids and her grandkids, and all the people that we've met, and what we learned from them and what we took away from it. Just in my kids' experience, when my daughter was writing her college essays, like those were life-changing moments that really taught my kids what life was really about and what to really value and appreciate, because it really simplified things, and it really um took down all the barriers to give them that different experience of just learning that we're all just humans, like living different experiences, but at the heart of it, like we have very similar needs and wants, and we all like to connect. And I love that your retreat offerings create connections is the foundation for that, because what we find out is through connecting with other people, we have a we find a deeper connection with parts of ourselves that we didn't even know existed. And some of those things are empathy and compassion and awareness, and just really understanding that part of ourselves that wants to we realize that the world, as big as it seems, is actually a lot smaller than it makes everything so small when you're in those communities doing that work, because it's a human to human connection. So opportunities in Central America, opportunities in South America is where a lot of your work has been. You have a retreat in Belize in October, which this podcast is probably coming out sometime around then, and then one in Cuba. Um, you probably don't have favorites, but I'm just wondering, and I know you have a special connection with Colombia, but what is the place that you really do love? If you had a favorite, what is the place that you really do love to travel to, and why?
That's a hard one to answer because
I
I have
know.
or what it is, there's every country is so unique. Um, I will mention about Cuba because again, that there's a misconception out there by many, many, many people that it's still not legal to go to Cuba. So I want to clarify for anybody listening out there, it is 100% legal for United States citizens to go to Cuba. You can get your visa at the airport with American Airlines or any other airlines that's flying there. You just check a box on the tourist visa card, and one of the categories out of 12 categories is helping the Cuban people. And the way we do
Mhm.
that multifold, but just for an example, you stay they call them casa particulares, or the equivalent of an Airbnb, where you're staying in their homes or they have rented out houses, and they serve you breakfast, and it's like a bed and breakfast basically, but it's very much the bed and breakfast, and it's a phenomenal experience to connect with the Cuban people because they give to you with their heart and soul most beautiful breakfast with fresh fruit juices that we don't even have in the United States, some of the fruits, and fresh plates of fruit and eggs, and just a wonderful warm coffee and breakfast. But more than that, they really make you feel at home. And I think if I were even to put a plug, if you will, for Cuba, it's such a unique country to travel to because it is still a communist country. it gives you a perspective that you won't get going to most other countries in the
Mm.
world today. And I say that because I've been to other countries. I spent a year almost in Albania, which is under a totalitarian regime for many years. Once the regime falls, once communism falls, the country changes overnight. And it's a unique opportunity to see what a country is like now under communism, but how the people are so entrepreneurial, they're so giving of themselves, and they are in one of a very serious crisis economically right now. They are in very dire straits in terms of even having electricity on a not even a daily basis, an hourly basis. They don't know when the lights are cut out every day, every hour of every day. And it's not, I mean, it's not something to laugh about. I can, say that because it's very serious. I mean, you try to even plan to cook a meal and you don't have electricity in your house all of a sudden. Electricity goes out, you can't cook. You're on a Zoom call, you're on a phone call, anything, your Wi-Fi goes out, you can't do anything on your computer. We take those things for granted until all of a sudden you don't have internet connection or you don't have electricity in your house and everything changes and you don't know when it's going to come back on. It kind of makes you a little crazy because it's really hard to get anything done, but it really gives you perspective on what life can be and what hardships can be, and the costs of the most basic things are astronomically high. Food, I mean, a price of cooking oil is over $10 US dollars. And imagine just to try to cook beans and rice. So it again gives you perspective on what we have here and how you can contribute. And that, some of the organizations I just wanted to mention that I like to come alongside are frequently have a US based nonprofit status, which is valuable for American citizens who might want to give a donation and don't know how or the best way to do it. They can still get the benefit, the tax benefit, through donating in the United States and rely on this nonprofit entity to give to the Cuban people, for example. Or the same is true with Colombia. There's a broader organization called Caring for Colombia, where it's based in New York, but they are the umbrella for over 50 nonprofit organizations that are Colombian based in Colombia. But you can give here in the United States and funnel the money to the organization you want in Colombia. Um, that said, I,
Awesome.
yeah, sorry, that I get, it's a hard question to answer because I love
Yeah.
every I go to. It's all
Well, you've sparked my interest in Cuba. I know the retreat in January, the dates don't work for me. I'll be in Hawaii. But with what you just shared, that I haven't been to Cuba and it's like so close to us.
Mhm.
We've been able to travel there for like 8 or 9 years, I think. It's been a while, but I know the people who have been there love it when they go there. So I love that you shared that, and you also have an opportunity for anybody who's interested in traveling to Cuba in January. Um, would you like to share a little bit about the dates and that retreat that's coming up?
Sure. It's January 17th to the 22nd, and it's in a city called Trinidad, Cuba. And another aspect of my retreats, I like to go deep with everything I do, like deep with the organizations we're coming alongside and deep with even in a community. And I say that because I like to be in one city. Everybody wants to go to Havana, for example, and that's wonderful. I love Havana. It's an incredible city. Trinidad is a smaller city. It's up in the mountain area. It's near a different airport called Santa Clara. So you can actually fly from Miami to Santa Clara. You don't have to go through Havana. If you go through Havana, you have to drive about 6 hours to get up to Trinidad. But I say that because it's a smaller city, much more easy to get around as a foreigner, especially. But it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site with cobblestone streets and incredible artisan work. It's also close to the mountains and close to the ocean. So that's where we're going to be doing our retreat in January. But I also always offer the opportunity for people to say, well, I'd love to do that, but I also want to go to Havana, or I also want to go somewhere else in Cuba. We are more than happy to help facilitate extensions of trips if it's not part
Mhm.
of our immediate retreats, but I can collaborate with the local people connections that we have to get you down to Havana afterwards, and you can fly out of Havana on the way back, for example. So there's lots of ways to travel to Cuba.
Yes, that's a wonderful offer. I know we do that with our retreats. We offer the retreat and then the extended stay for those who want to travel just a little bit more outside of the retreat area. So I love that you offer that. Anything else you'd like to share with the community of listeners?
We'd love to have anybody if you're interested in traveling with a purpose. You can listen to the interviews that I've done on. I have them all listed on my website. They're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's travel underscore with underscore purpose underscore globally. So that's where you'll find it. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. But as Jen mentioned, if you are wanting to go to a different country or already launching a retreat and want to incorporate service as part of your retreat and aren't sure how or what to do, and you'd like me to come alongside in any way, shape, or form, or doesn't, you tell me, I'm happy to collaborate. I love collaborating with other women and or listeners that are out there that want to create, design something together. Let me know. And I do just, I guess, well, also mention, I have spent a bit of time in Eastern Europe. As I mentioned, I lived in Albania. My husband's from Romania. So I do have contacts in Eastern Europe as well. So if you're not into Central South America, we can go to another region of the world as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to emphasize and just mention for those of you that are interested in hosting retreats, I did a podcast on the top 5 mistakes that retreat leaders make. And the first one is that a lot of people think that they can create a retreat based on an experience that they may have had going to retreat. And I can't tell you the value of having somebody to really support you in creating, especially an international retreat, especially if you're maybe not as experienced traveling as an experienced traveler. Just understanding all the little things like you mentioned about the visa. You make it sound easy, but actually to somebody who hasn't traveled as much, to really, I cannot tell you the value of like the stress that is released and how much easier it is to have that person in your back pocket that knows the community, that knows how to travel, that knows how to get there, or even the person like what I do to help you design that retreat, to lead that retreat. I mean, it's worth like the time and energy, the investment, whatever it is. I know I've collaborated with retreat coordinators before, and there's an exchange of energy and a financial investment for it. And it's just, especially if you're just getting started or if you're going to a new place, it is just so worth the investment for a more pleasant opportunity, which means, of course, a better experience for the people that are coming to the retreat, which then, of course, keeps them coming back year after year, no matter where you go, which has been my experience. I mean, I don't even have to list my retreats. A lot of people just follow me wherever I go because they just know the quality of the retreat experience. So when you as the retreat leader, the retreat coordinator are supported and taken care of, and you get to create this experience for your community, for your clients, and you have that support, it's really better for everybody. It just makes the experience more enjoyable for both you and for the people coming. And so I hope that if you're a retreat leader listening, that you take that away from this experiences. And I hope that we've inspired you to consider traveling with purpose and maybe collaborating in some way to facilitate those connections in places that you travel to support the community, to maybe support a nonprofit. And if you are looking for someplace new and specifically interested in Central America, South America, or as you mentioned, Eastern Europe, you can reach Aileen through createconnections.net. And where else can we find you?
You can find the podcast on Spotify. Again, it's
Yes.
Travel with Purpose, globally, underscored. I'll send you all the links in your show notes. And again, it's Travel with Purpose on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, those are the
Awesome. Travel with purpose. So I hope we've inspired listeners to plan a trip somewhere, whether it's a retreat or not, plan a trip somewhere, create connections in other countries, and just enjoy learning other cultures and traveling to new places. Thank you for listening in again, and we'll see you next week. Aloha. Stop. There we go.